Hey folks, welcome to the channel. I am Brian James. This is Three Rivers Wrench. On this episode, we are reassembling a GM Saginaw tilt steering column. This one came out of a 1978 Chevy Nova. Happens to be a 9C1, which is a police car, if you don't know. LA Sheriff's Department, we're restoring that car. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So, check that series out. It's very cool. We're going to go ahead and step by step do every little piece, and hopefully this will help somebody out in the future. So without further ado, let's go. All right, folks, what I've got is the lower part of the housing, or the service manual calls this part the mast. This is the part that will bolt to the firewall on lower part, right? I've got it clamped. It's a really good idea. Then you can kind of work by yourself. You don't have to have somebody holding it for you, or got it between your knees, fumbling around. This works good. We will be unclamping it and reclamping it at certain points during assembly, but for right now, this is what it looks like. The next part is going to be the shift housing. This is where your shifter is attached to. Now, it's keyed in such a way where it's only going to go on this tube one way, like that. See, it's not going, not going, not going, and then on. So, real simple. The next part is going to be the actual shift tube itself. Looks like so. Pay attention here. We have a keyway. Now, on the inside of this guy, there's a keyway. So essentially what's going to happen here, it's going to look like that. See that? But it's got to go through the lower housing first. So what we're going to do is we're going to put shift housing there. We're going to run this tube up through the bottom. We're going to get this started. As soon as I find that keyway, there we go, we're started. Now, it's a snug fit. We're okay for right now. We have to add a couple pieces before we really collapse this guy down. And those pieces are a wave washer and a lock plate. Okay, I've got my wave washer. That's just going to lay up here loose, like so. Then we've got this lock plate. Notice it has like little corners. We'll just call it 4 corners. These two are going to fit into little windows that are cut into the inside of the mast here. There's one there, one there. This part can be a little frustrating, but what we're going to do is come in at an angle. It's going to sit like so. Just like that. Now everything's kind of loose until we drive the shift tube. This guy, he's got to go up further. So notice down here, this lever has got to be inside that window when we start the seat. So what I ended up doing was taking a socket that is big enough to fit around the top of that shift tube and rest on the plate. And I took another socket or something that I could sit the shift tube on. Now we can reclamp this to the bench. Now this is what it looks like fully seated. Now you can see we have a couple more windows on the end of the shift tube there. Right there. There's one over here. And that is where this guy's going to go. This has got to go in first though, this little washer. So we're going to take this washer, set that in place. And then we're going to take this guy, And I'm going to have to put the camera down because I can't do this one-handed. And fully seated, that's what our little clip looks like at the top of the shift tube there. Okay, next up we have the bearing housing and the ignition actuator rod. Looks like this, got this piece on the end of it. Now this guy actually slides into a groove and moves just like so. What you're gonna wanna do is take some white lithium grease, spray or brush some on here, and really anything in this column that is a friction piece where two pieces are rubbing against each other, put a little bit of lithium grease. But we're gonna install this part next, and there's some things we gotta be aware of. What we're gonna do is we're gonna feed this ignition rod up through the bottom. And it's gonna come up here on this side, and then we're gonna bring it over, you'll see in a second, and it's gotta sit in this little square hole. Now notice on our lock plate, we've got the 4 threaded holes. Those have to align with the bearing housing. This guy, there's our 4 threaded holes. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna brush a little bit of lithium grease on this guy. All right, now I'm gonna feed this rod up behind here. That's what we look like. Remember that little square window? It's kind of sitting right on top of that. I know it's difficult to see. This will make sense in a second. And we're going to take our housing. Okay. Now you can see how that lock rod or ignition rod is going to slide right in that guy. Now we got to put our bolts in. All right, the 4 bolts that lock the bearing housing to that lock plate are inverted Torx. If you need to know which socket it is, it's an E8 socket. Now, if you've got 3/8 drive sockets like I do for these guys, it's going to be too fat to really grab a hold. What I found will work is a 1/4 inch socket will fit right down on these inverted Torx and work just fine. All right, I've got the 4 bolts tightened. What I'm gonna do also, take a piece of masking tape. I'm gonna tape this rod in place just cause I don't want it slipping out of there. It can come out of place and fall out. It's just, that's extra insurance that it won't. All right, next up is the steering shaft itself. I've greased this up, overly greased it really good. And all right guys, I had to unclamp from the bench because my ceilings are too low, but we're gonna take the shaft, we're gonna slip it through. Just like so. And then I'm gonna reclamp. All right, we've got our steering shaft in there. It's just kind of loose for right now. Now the fun begins. Oh, and I don't really mean that. It's not a lot of fun. What I've done is I've taken my tilt lever and we're going to temporarily install it back into the tilt housing. Looks like so. Now we have this guy here. This is the ignition rack. This thing here. It's actually kind of spring loaded. Moves back and forth. We're going to want this out as far as we can get it. This section here is going to engage with our ignition rod. You'll see what I mean in a moment. The other thing we're going to have to do is install a bearing in here. This is where the fun begins, because you got to be careful that you don't lose any of the ball bearings out of this assembly. They look like this. Now this thing's pretty dry right now. This is the upper bearing. It's the same as the lower. What I do is I grease this thing up really good, just like so. So that grease is going to hold those bearings in place. Now what that thing has to do is go inside here. I'm going to take my bearing, really greased up. I'm going to set it in place. Looks like so. Now what I have to do, unfortunately, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit more grease. We'll put it in here. Because I've done this a few times, guys, and these bearings, if they come out, and they're just rattling around loose inside this housing, you got to take it all apart again and do it. We're going to hold it like so. We're going to take our thumb here. We're going to disengage the tilt teeth. These are what grab inside here. That way it'll slip right down on top. But as we're doing this, like I said, this window in the ignition rack has to line up with the rod in here. So it goes down like so. We're going to tilt it a little bit. Yes, we're keeping pressure here so we can get that engaged with that rod. All right, this little opening here is what's going to engage in that ignition rack right here. It's going to engage right here. So that gap is going to fit around right here, if that makes sense. Go ahead and pull back, coming down slowly. Okay, we're engaged with that rod. We're going to keep coming down. I'll try to straighten up a little bit. And there we go. We're in. As long as this is lined up, you'll see there's large holes there where the slugs go. There's one on either side. We should be good to go. Guys, that is not easy. I'm telling you. If you don't have to go in this deep when you're doing a column, don't. If you're confident in your abilities, go for it. All right, what I want to do next is we have these two slugs. When they fit right in the side here, I'm going to start these, but I'm not going to seat them just yet. What you got to be careful of, the shaft can move up and down. Remember the bearings inside there. What can happen is they can fall out if this is not seated up against them. So what we got to do now is make sure we just pull this shaft up so it's up against the bearing. Otherwise, down like this, if we go tapping things in with hammers, those little bearings are going to come out, and then you got to take this all apart and do it again. Believe me, I know. So what we're going to do is we're going to support this bottom shaft in the upward position, and then we're going to continue our assembly. So there's not a lot of movement with this shaft. I don't know, ½ inch, something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take another clamp, grab the bottom there, and support it just like so. I'm going to go ahead and remove my tilt lever. I'm going to go ahead and tap these slugs in. right, next up is the tilt spring itself. On this guy, there's a slug that looks like that, spring, and then the retainer cap. Notice it has two little ears on it and a square hole in the top. We're going to use a Phillips screwdriver to install this guy. It's basically a push down with a screwdriver and turn. This spring is no joke, so you're going to have to put a little bit of pressure behind it. All right, I'm going to take my greased up bearing, upper bearing, put that on. We have a upper bearing retainer. That's going to go on next. Kind of seat that in place. All right, we're going to take our turn signal housing or ignition switch housing, or whatever you prefer. We're going to go ahead and slide this down. Secure that with the 3 Phillips screws. All right, I'm going to go ahead and install the lock cylinder into the housing. It should be in the off, unlocked position. There's a little keyway, lines up here. And then you can actually look down into the top here and see the lock cylinder engage with the switch. You might have to turn the key a little bit to engage it, and there you go, it should slip right in. Now if we did everything right, everything's turning, our rod down here is moving with the key. I can pull the key out, put the key in, turn it. Okay, key's not coming out, so that's good. And this is the steering wheel lock here. You can see this little nub. So that's what locks your steering wheel. So when we go to the on position, it'll unlock the steering wheel. So looking good. The worst is behind us, guys. Guess we can put the tilt lever in permanently now. We'll go ahead and do our shift lever. Up next is this upper bearing seat or cap. It's going to go right on top. Just kind of push that into place. Just like so. Before we forget, we have the key warning switch. I went ahead and took a little piece of Scotch-Brite and cleaned up the contacts on this. You're going to want the key in the on position. So right about there. There's the switch installed. Couldn't film installing it because my fingers are so fat, but there you go. Real easy, just slip it in there. All right, guys, the next thing we're going to install is the turn signal switch itself. We're going to go ahead and replace this old one. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I just don't want to run into problems down the road. So we got a new one. Got this one from Napa. This part number is DL6209. Now there's a couple different options for these. I know when I was looking this part up for this vehicle, it asked me if I had cornering lights, which we don't. So If you have cornering lights, you're probably going to have a different wiring set up on the connector. One thing to do for sure is take your old one and your new one and compare wire color and number of wires. I did notice 2 of the wires on the new one were different colors, but they went to the same apparatus inside the switch, so we're good there. All right, I've got my my new multi-function switch, turn signal switch, whatever you want to call it, and I've got the wires pretty straight, and I got a nice bend here at the connector. That's going to help facilitate getting this thing through this tiny little hole they give you in the column. So you may need to grab a skinny screwdriver to help kind of poke it down through. Looks like I'm going to need to do that as well. It'll go down so far, then it kind of gets caught up. If you take a screwdriver, we're not pushing on the wires, just on the plastic body of the connector. There we go. It's coming out the bottom here. Pull it down through. And then there's the 3 mounting screws. We're going to line this up with those and run those guys home. All right, I'm going to put my hazard switch knob on. Just a Phillips screw. Make sure it works. Good. Next up is the turn signal stock. Just 1 Phillips screw right through that little window. There we go. Make sure we work. Nice. All right, several items going on now. We've got this large spring, the cancel cam, which if you're reusing your old one, take a Scotch-Brite, clean this contact up that goes around the outer edge here. This is for the horn. And then this guy goes on, and then we have our lock plate. This is keyed, so it will only go on the shaft one way. Then we got to set up our tool, compress this, and put this little ring on before you do that though. Ring goes on, compress, and then we seat that ring and then remove the tool. Okay, I've got it compressed. Go ahead and push this little ring. If it cooperates, straight down. There we go. One thing I don't want to forget, at least on this application, it's got a little spring that goes in there and this little horn contact. Okay, now we have this lock plate cover. This just snaps into place. Nice. Well, I've laid it down on the bench here. We're good at the other end. We've just got this bearing and adapter that goes in the bottom here. This is keyed. It only goes on one way. And we got a cap. Again, goes on one way. And once you got that into place, we've got a big E-clip. And that just snaps into place. So when you're all done down here, this is what it looks like. All right, no particular order, but we've got a park neutral safety switch. If you notice, there's a P and an N. This is the switch inside that moves. I've got the column in park, so there's a little window in here that matches up with this little guy, and it should just snap into place, and then it's held in with a couple 9/32 screws. Now we've got our actual ignition switch. When you turn the key, that's what's making the connection to start the car. So there's a little window here in this black rectangular piece. There's a little hole where the end of this rod goes. So right up through there, and a couple screws. I believe these are the 5/16 variety. Yep, 5/16. Okay, column's looking great. Last thing's the steering wheel. But before I install this, I need to restore it. It's got that GM sticky steering wheel thing going on. It's basically a fly trap. I can see fingerprints from people who drove this car in 1979. So we're gonna restore this. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Steering wheel is restored. Hey, you wanna see how to do this? Check out my other video on fixing GM sticky steering wheels. Anyways, let's install this guy to finish this up. I'm gonna install my steering wheel. Make sure you line the little horn contact with the hole in the wheel carefully. I'm gonna install the 13/16 nut on here. Torque it down. I had to unclamp from the bench because a lot of weight was getting really top heavy. On this column, it had this little retainer here. This is just like a safety, just to make sure the nut, if it ever comes loose, doesn't come completely off. Just goes right on like so. All right, I'm going to be installing several things at once here. Now, everybody's will be a little different. Depends on your steering wheel. With this guy, we have a center button, and we have horn pieces that go in here. We've got a retainer and screws and a little flex plate. If you have a different wheel, you're going to have a different setup. But for this guy, we're going to take this plate, has 3 holes. We're going to line it up with the 3 threaded holes in the wheel. Kind of like that. Then I have the horn button retainer. And then I've got this plastic piece that holds the screws. This all goes on at the same time. Now, if I did this right, I should be able to push on this cup and it flexes in and out. Yep. All right, and then last but not least is the horn button itself. This one's keyed. There we go. Well, folks, that's a wrap on assembling a Saginaw steering column. This really wasn't done for entertainment, guys. This was more for if you're into one of these, you want to restore one. It's a step-by-step process. I appreciate you watching if you made it this far, though. This is going to look really good in Bear or 9C1 Nova. If you're interested, check out my other videos. We're restoring him. We're doing a super thorough job, and there's a lot of tips and tricks. So thanks for watching, guys. You have a good one. I will see you later.